Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you once again for taking the time to join us for another of our monthly live webinar in joint collaboration with our business partner, HP. Our webinar focus for today is on a business process testing test tool. I am very proud to be joined today by my colleagues, Peter Shea, which is our Global Alliance Director for Test House, and Rob Stock, our ALM Pre-Sales Consultant from HP. I will quickly go through the agenda in brief. Basically, Peter will go through the Welcome and Test House overview. After that, it will be up to Rob to present the business process testing, including I think maybe 15 to 20 minutes demo, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. Before I go, also during the presentation, if you wanted to make the screen larger, please don't forget to press the full screen at the top of the page, especially for when Rob will do the demo for the business process testing tool. So without further delay, I now pass you over to my colleague, Peter. Peter?
Thank you very much, Mel, and welcome to the latest in our series of webinars, and I'm very pleased to be sharing the stage today with Rob. What I'll do is I'll give you a quick overview of Test House. Many of you may have been familiar with us in the past, but the company was formed in 2000. Our focus is purely on IT risk mitigation. We don't get involved in any other type of consultancy, so everything we do is around performance, functionality, and security. So it's a very narrow niche, but a very deep one. We've been headquartered in London since 2000, and we have additional full-service centres in Madrid, Dubai, and Trivandrum. We've also got overseas sales operations East and West Coast US and the Middle East. Oops, too quick. Fat fingers, excuse me. In terms of our relationship with HP, we've been partners for over 10 years, initially with Mercury Interactive before the takeover in 2006, and we achieved gold status in 2009. Initially, our strapline was the independent experts in software testing. We wanted to ensure that customers could rely on our independence, but what we found was that over 90% of the engagements we had where tools were involved, we were using HP, so we weren't quite as independent as we thought we were. So we therefore changed our strapline to IT risk reduction through best practice. HP have continued the Mercury philosophy of reinvesting in their tools, which should ensure that they still remain the market leader. One other thing we are very keen to develop is our training capability around HP tools, and I've been asked to remind you that we still have a few spaces left on our subsidised QTP course over the weekend of the 29th and 30th of October. So if you have any interest in attending that, please give Mel a call or drop her an email, and she'd be happy to sign you up. So that's the end of my little intro. Over to Rob, and thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Peter. So my name's Rob Stock. I work for HP. I'm in our pre-sales application quality management group, dealing with tools such as Quality Center, Performance Center, etc. So today, I just want to take you through our business process testing, talk about what it is, what it does, how it can help you, and some of the benefits that you can get out of using these tools. So to understand what business process testing is, to begin with, it's kind of useful to understand what people are doing today and some of the inefficiencies that are around in testing. I mean, all the analysts have been saying it for a good number of years, and I'm sure it'll be true for a lot more years to come. But 80% of testing is still manual. It's still manual. Automated testing is great and it works well, but obviously there's a trade-off in terms of time needed to automate something and how much you're going to run it going forward. So we're still at 80% of testing. And if you kind of think about it, there's two distinct areas around what people are doing, especially if you're using things like Word or Excel to manage your tests or to create your test detail, what they are. So on the one hand, you have a huge amount of detail in your Word documents, in your Excel spreadsheets, detailing what those tests are, what all the test steps are, etc. Now, the downside with that is that there's a fair amount of effort in the maintenance of keeping it updated. If one thing changes, then you may well have to update 5 or 6 different documents, etc., which takes a huge amount of time. So then on the other hand, it's quite possible to kind of lightly, it says they're poorly documented, so kind of put very light documentation in the test. So obviously, you know, when things change, there isn't such amount of work to do to update all these tests. And it really kind of relies on you know, people assuming that the tester knows the application, and people assuming that that tester is going to be around the organisation forever. So if somebody else happens to come in, then they don't necessarily have all the detail because it's not been documented properly, and you know, leads to all these inaccurate and inconsistent testing steps. So with that in mind, business process testing was designed to kind of alleviate all these issues which people have found. So, you know, how you reduce the large amount of duplicated effort when tests are created in your flat files. How can you reduce the amount of time and the resources that you currently spend maintaining those tests? How you can assure that your testing is done accurately and consistently across the course of many different test cycles. So test cycles obviously change over time, and how can you make sure that they're still relevant? Also, with all the focus on shuffling files around, how can you, with confidence, assure that you're testing what the business actually wants you to test in the first place? How can you make sure that your tests actually reflect what your business requirements are? So with that, this is a screenshot of business process testing. So business process testing is a snap-in module, if you like, which fits directly into Quality Center to integrate with everything else that Quality Center can do. So here you can see we've got in the middle of the screen, we've got different components that defined. This is all web-based. We can drag the components that we've got on the right-hand side within our component library to create new tests. And it's about building tests up from the individual elements which make that test up, and centralize these things across the entire team. So if you think about it, we've got 3 tests here: create order, delete order, update order. Now, if you think about it, probably typically with most testing, what goes on is you're doing the same thing multiple times in different tests. So if you imagine these were 3 Word documents detailing a manual test, you'd have the login part across all 3. So if the login needs to change for whatever reason, then you need to update all 3. What we're talking about here is introducing each individual component into Quality Center that can be maintained on its own, but nonetheless concatenated together to form the wider test. So you can see here, again, view order appears in all the tests, delete order appears in the update order too, plus also the search. So what we're talking about here is centralizing these components into individual pieces that can be managed. And really it's about letting the business people who understand the application order these components so that then, you know, the testers who perhaps understand just the testing, and bridging that gap between the two organizations. So here we've got a component, create order, which has been created. Now, typically speaking, as things go through, perhaps we want to update that component, change something about it. But because it points to test 1, test 2, test 3, and test 4, all these tests are relying off this individual thing. Once we've updated it, then it can be automatically propagated as we pass out whatever those changes are to the individual tests, saving a huge amount of time in the test maintenance. So once we've created these individual components based on the business process, here we have a business process on the left-hand side, and we've got all our individual components within BPT within the middle. We can relate these components directly to any requirements we might have. So It may be that one test run with all these different components relates to one requirement, perhaps, or many requirements. But here we can run through the test, and as the test gets run, we can decide what it is that we want to prove, so that once the test is finished, we can say, yes, it's met this requirement, yes, it's met that requirement, perhaps no, as in the scenario here, verify order, perhaps that requirement's not been met. Once we can run through these things, then we can then define, we can then measure what the shape of testing is based upon how it reports to the actual business and how these things reflect what the business actually requires. So it may well be also, because there's lots of different scenarios here, that you need to configure it so that perhaps if one test runs through and it's pointing to different requirements, it may well be that certain parts of the system haven't been built yet, so you don't necessarily be able to test those. So you can go through and define what it is that you want to go and prove as you're building your tests, which is getting back to the old adage, really. It's letting you test earlier on in the life cycle, perhaps before a full system has been developed. One of the other important things of business process testing is because we obviously want to save time by creating these components, but we also want to reduce time by the amount of components that we've got and the amount of updates that we need to do. So using this, we can introduce test configurations. So we can perhaps have one test or one component with different scenarios. So, for example, it may well be that if we were an airline, we were checking people into the airline, letting them book flight tickets on. We have some regular travels and some gold card member travellers who want to get their upgrades. So we can put different data in through these different components and get different outcomes. So we can measure them depending on what the data is. I'm just a regular traveller based on the test details, or perhaps I'm a gold card member, and something else can happen. So it's one component being able to be guided by whatever data that goes into it. So here, similarly, we can see that we've got different test configuration. In this example, it's a bank, so that when the customer order checks in online, they want to pay their credit card charge or checking savings accounts, debit, etc. But it might be that once, by default, once a portion of a test fails, then the whole test fails. But it might be that you don't necessarily want that, or it may be that you do. But it's all configurable. So it may well be that one test points to the one requirement. The one requirement is that it needs to work in Firefox version 3.6 or 4, and it needs to work in Internet Explorer 7 or 8. So we can run the one test, perhaps with 2 iterations, run it twice. But nonetheless, one passes and one fails, hence the requirement that the business one, it must work in Internet Explorer and Firefox, has failed, and we're able to define all these things. So this is iteration within BPT. We can iterate around whole sets of components, a whole test. We can chain all these different components together and go round and round the test, perhaps, like I say, to try out different browsers or different operating systems, etc. Or we can iterate individual components and go around different components and put in different data each time we do it. So, for example, somebody paying a bill in the last scenario online, you might want to check that, perhaps they've only got £10 in their account, and so you want to check that they can pay a bill for 8, but then another iteration of the same component can go through, throw different data at it, and that data may be £11 or something where they don't have it, and something else has got to happen. So that's kind of like an overview of building the business process components. The next part is being able to run these components in an easy manner. Now, we introduced something called Sprinter with Quality Center 11, which is the latest version of Quality Center, which enables you to run all these business process tests. I mean, you can run them traditionally in a traditional manual sense, but what Sprinter does is it kind of bridges the gap between wholly manual and wholly automated. So you can open Sprinter and it will connect directly to Quality Center, bring all these tests down, open the different test cases, and you can save whatever results of the test run are to Quality Center. So you can see here we've got, on this screenshot, we've got a business process test defined. So these are the different steps that we've got to go through: open application, launch application, login, navigate, etc. So it would detail these steps as we go through. Once we hit that green run button there, up in the top left-hand corner, we go through and it produces these tabs, which you can see. I'll show you in more detail as we go into look at the application, which you can see better. But behind all these tabs are different tools that you can use to help automate or semi-automate your manual test. So even though this is just a manual test, things like being able to record macros that you use quite often, being able to easily capture screenshots. A lot of what people have to do is capture screenshots at every stage of what they're doing within their testing to prove that they've done it. This will do that sort of thing for you automatically. Also, once it's done and you found a defect, that defect can be logged directly back into Quality Center, creating all the detail along with that step, what it is that you've just done, the last 5 things you've done, not what it told you to do, but what it really, what you really actually did, and then put that defect into Quality Center. So, actually, quite timely. Just seen a question come in here, which has been pointed out to me. It's talking about how do you define these things? So, do these mandate that it need to be a top-down, a business-led approach to create business process testing? And the answer is it doesn't have to be. I mean, this is a good example of that you've typically speaking, business people may well want to define what these components are, etc., and how they relate down, and then push them down to the testers. But also here, using Sprinter, testers can do exploratory testing and build up their own tests too. So just by clicking around, open Sprinter and then click around in your application, everything that you do is recorded. So, for example, you open up the calculator application in Windows, you click around, click on the number of buttons, etc., change it from normal view to scientific view. All that information will be recorded as to what you've done using QTP, Quick Test Pro technology behind. You're testing manually, but nonetheless saving time. So you can see here that on the right-hand side, we've created a script just by clicking around. You can take that script, export it out, and then import it again to Quality Center. So export it out of Sprinter, import it into Quality Center, and build up your business process test based on that information. And just finally, we're talking about different testing. So we're talking about testing different environments. So we've got, in the Internet Explorer Firefox example, we've got 2 different environments. Now, obviously, when we're testing things, we want to save time in those different components. How do we do that? Well, one way is to automate it, but another way is to use Sprinter and use mirror testing, which comes with it. Now, by default, you can open up all sorts of different environments within the same application. I click around on one application, and whatever keystrokes I'm making are replicated onto different machines, different boxes going forward. So here we've got an example of testing 3 different machines. I've got my main machine, a primary one, and a couple of secondary machines, and they may well be testing Internet Explorer, Firefox, some Windows XP, Windows Vista, whatever it may well be, different environments to run the test. And it's keeping there, understanding what's different about the different screens. If something changes, you get a pop-up box on one, it will report, and those green screens, which you can see there, turn red, tell you need to change, need to look at something rather. So that's kind of an overview, just to give you, pull all this together, what we're actually talking about. If we just take one different scenario, so we've got requirements here. The requirements are bank customers must be allowed to pay their bills online, and bank customers must be allowed to pay multiple bills, pay one bill after another, etc., etc. These are the requirements from business, all the way down to using different versions of Firefox. So how does that work? How do we strip this down and build the different tests, build the different components out of it? So the first thing to understand is that from these 6 requirements here, there's really one main flow, which is pay a bill online, And the others are just alternate versions of that. So pay a bill online. Second one is bank customers must pay multiple bills. They're still paying a bill. It's just a different alternate course. Bank customers must pay a bill online after changing the payee in the same section. Just alternate versions of the same thing. So we've got four different tests, really, which we need to define. And how can we do this using what we've just talked about, using business process testing? Well, test 1 would take up requirement 1, requirement 5, and requirement 6. So bank customers must pay a bill online. The transaction summary displays to the customer after transfer, etc. This is just a case of defining the different components that you want to have, the different components that you want to test with. So one test with different components. And then 5, bank customers may withdraw funds out of any accounts when paying a bill. This is a case of using test configuration. Same test, just throw different data at it. Which, like I say, so if someone's got £10 in their account, you want to check that £5 works, £15 doesn't, and all those other different variations of it. And, if you pay a bill for £5, you've only got £5 left, etc. That's just using different test configuration, one test. Bill payment works in Firefox 3.4 and Internet Explorer 7.8.9. Again, use Sprinter with its mirroring tools. One test, which you can run, maintain one thing, but you're managing all the different requirements. And then again, test 2, bank customers must pay multiple bills. You're using the same components as the other ones, some extras, admittedly, but nonetheless you're reducing things. So what does that look like? It's really come down to this. So requirement 1, we've got the login box, and obviously login is common across all these different tests. Same component. If we update one, everything gets updated. Pay a bill, and here we on test 2, we want to pay 3 bills at once online. So what do? We just go around and iterate that second box, the pay bill test, 3 times with 3 different values of what it's tests. But nonetheless, it's still the same individual component. And then again through to requirement 3 and requirement 4. So that's a quick overview of it. I just want to flick over now to show you what that actually looks like within the tool itself. So this is Quality Center, and we can see here we've got a business components module. This is created when you add in BPT. And what this does is it acts as a library for all your different components that you've got. So here I've got different folders. I'm going to go into my flight application. Under flight application, I've got order detail. So I've got the different components: delete order, fax order, fill order, details out, etc. Now, you can either, a business person can request these different components from different test engineers, or they can go and create the basis of themselves, and then the test engineers themselves can fill out any further detail. So if we look here, delete order, got all the details of what it's about. We've got a screenshot of what it looks like. Perhaps this is before the application's been built even. This might just be a mock-up in Visio or something like that. And we've got the different component steps, which go through to detail what it's about. So step 1, step 2, step 3, etc. What we need to do within that particular test. So once we've created this library of components, we want to be able to quickly use them. The whole point of BPT is to speed up, so you can spend a bit of time in the first place creating your components, but then you can quickly reuse these components and deploy new tests. So you can make sure that your individual components are accurate. You've created them once, the log in, log out, whatever it may well be, and just reuse all the time. So within Quality Center, we come down to test plan, and we can create a new test based on those components. So I'll come up here, define new test, give it my test, detail what it's about. Now here, I've got certain fields which have been defined as mandatory. And obviously you can change these things, decide what you want to be mandatory or not. I'm just going to fill up these different different parts on my system. So okay, now I've created this new test called my test within test plan. We've got the details here, which I've just filled in. And I've got the different test scripts, which I can go through. Now, you can see here I've got new component requests. So if I'm a business person, perhaps there's a component there that I don't have, that I want to create. Or I can go and select different components here. And I've actually got that window open. So it brings up the library of components. So within my test, I want to first initialize the application. So I drag that in. Next part, I want to log in. So it's a case of picking what you want, dragging and dropping to actually fill the whole test. Next part is to open an order. Perhaps I want to search. Perhaps the search for order isn't there, which it isn't in this case, but not to worry. So open order, update order. I'll have that one too, and then log out. So that's my test created. The components were already there. I've just simply reused what's already there to create my new test. So now down in Test Lab, I can go through and I can create a new test set. So I'll create a new test set which will link to that. Call it my test. My test set. Say OK to that. Then I can come down here and add my tests to my test set. So that's my test set created, and I can go off and run that. So we've got the details. So here I can say, and I can go off and run it. I can run it with manual runner, or I could go off and run it with Sprinter. So I don't think I added that. So now if I want to run it with Sprinter, I can say go off and run it. Here I can bring up Sprinter from this place. I actually have Sprinter open as it is. So I can come in here and I can open different test sets, open from ALM, or I can pick on a favourite that I've got within Sprinter. I'm just going to pick on a favourite that I've got. And this will open all those tests that I defined within Quality Centre, all those BPT tests. It will open and run for me. So we've got general steps, we've got the steps going down here, and you can see this is a BPT test because we've got the different, we've got the blue icon detailing what it is, telling me to open the application and go into these things. Once I go off and run this, this is an overview of what the tests are. Once I go ahead and run this, this will pull all the details down again from Quality Centre. It will open the application for me, and it will prep everything I need to do in order to fulfill the requirement of this particular test. So once that's done, you should see the application open, and we'll get the tabs. And then we can click around like we saw before. So here we go, we've got the application firing up. We've got the test steps, which we've got up here, the different tests which I can go through, and I can pass and fail these, the different tabs that I've got to enable me to do these things. I can perhaps change it to a different view, so I've got a ticker tape type view here. I can go through and click these. I've got macros, I can record macros, control the run. I've got different tools, so I can take screenshots. Screenshots get taken automatically. I can create a new defect directly within this test, and that defect gets stored within Quality Centre. Or I've got data injection down here when perhaps I come across a form and I want to inject data directly into it. Saves me typing. So I'm just going to quickly log in just to do something within this test. So I just sign into the application. I've got my sign on wrong. Not to worry, not an issue. So we just put anything in there, and you can see why later. So that's the application. So I'm finished with the test. So I can go through pass, fail, different steps as we go in, and all this information will be recorded. So let me just pass a couple of them, and then we'll stop midway through the run. So once now we end the run, and all those details are then recorded for me as part of the business process test. So I had the general steps, the things that I should have done, and then the steps, the things that I actually did do, or actually told to do, and the user actions, the things that I should have done. So you can see here I entered, username, Rob, I put in the password, click the sign in, type QWERTY. So this is actually recording everything that I really do. So this is where you can perhaps, if I wasn't running a test, do more kind of exploratory testing and then bring back from a bottom-up type approach rather than that business top-down approach. So we just come back to Quality Centre here. Once we've gone through, we can look at the details of whatever tests that we've had, what actually was the result of the tests once they've been run, and how they've been controlled, and what's going through. And again, if we come back to this log out component, we can come back to the business components. Any change that I want to make within any of these components is then again propagated out to all the other tests that rely on that individual component, thoroughly reducing the amount of time that you need to spend to update information. So we just flick back to the slides now. So really just to conclude as an overview of business process testing, huge amounts of benefit to be gained by using BPT, even if you never automate. I mean, BPT works great with automation, but it doesn't mean to say that you have to. You can still run these tests manually, but nonetheless keep these things in order. When you update one component, everything will update to two. But also, if you do want to automate, perhaps in the future, it's a great vehicle to be able to define what that test is. If you come back to the beginning, we were talking about how do we know that what the test is actually reflecting what the business wants. Once we've defined all these components and we can run through them, we can get a better idea of that is actually what the test should be, and therefore it makes it far easier to automate, whether that's a top-down business led approach by business people being able to get involved with the testing long before the technical testers do, before the application's actually available, or the testers themselves being able to define what all these tests are and create those tests just from exploratory type testing. So with that, I'd like to pass you back to Mel. I think he's going to look at some more questions which have come in.
Marvelous. Thank you so much, Rob. Peter, thank you for that. Quite an excellent presentation indeed. We are definitely now taking questions. Please do, if you do have any questions on the presentation for today, please do type them on your Q&A pod, which is at the bottom of your screen. We will take a few questions, and if we do run out of time, we will take some of them offline for Rob or Peter to answer those. So yeah, please do type your questions if you have them. That'd be much appreciated. I do have one question. I think this is for Rob. Rob, I think this is for you. What about our existing manual tests in Excel? Can they be easily converted into manual business process testing test components? Rob, can you?
Sure. The answer is yes. BPT, it gives you the ability to, because it's part of Quality Centre, everybody will have, tests of some sort, whether they're detailed in Excel or Word or whatever it may well be. But it gives you the ability to relatively simply import those tests, so you don't have to do a lot of rekeying to be able to create those tests within BPT. They can just simply become components that you can then reuse again. So yeah, it's a very easy thing to do, and that's what a lot of people do when they're first adopting BPT.
Marvelous. Thank you, Rob, for that. I do have a few questions coming on quite nicely. I have one question here is, are BPT and Sprinters separately licensed components to QC11? Rob? Okay.
Well, QC11 comes with Sprinter, assuming that you've got the three versions of Quality Centre. So you've got Starter Edition, Enterprise, and what we call ALM 11. So Sprinter comes with Enterprise and ALM. So it just doesn't come with Starter. But it's, yeah. So if you've got QC11 Enterprise, you get Sprinter. BPT is an add-on component that comes with it, but Sprinter definitely comes with 11.
Okay, perfect. Rob?
But it integrates, I should say, it integrates perfectly with BPT because it's designed to.
Great, thanks, Rob. I've got a few questions here. They're coming. I've got another question. what about managing change to the components themselves? How can we track this over time to see full picture of what has actually changed? Rob, would you want to take?
Well, that's with QC, I think QC 10, we're on version 11 now. Quality Center 10, we introduced version control and baselining, which is still there in 11. Just been enhanced so that every change you do with a BPT component or a requirement or a test, whatever it may well be, you change a component and it's all version controlled. So you check it out, check it in, make a change, becomes different version. But all that is tracked, it's all audited, so you can roll back, from version 1 to, from version 6 to version 5. And you can see whatever changes are there, so that you get a graphic indication of what has changed within the different components and who's made that change, all for obviously management and auditing use too.
Marvelous, thank you, Rob. Got a few more questions here. I think from the first question that we had, just continuing on from there, how powerful is the automation component compared to the full QTP tool?
I guess you're talking about Sprinter there. Well, there are two things. QTP doesn't go away. QTP still exists, and it still exists, and it still will exist for a long time yet. So what this is doing, when we created version 11 of Quality Center, we went out to all our customers and said, okay, you can't automate everything. It's just not possible. Generally speaking, most of our customers said at best they had about 40% of their tests automated at best. So that left 60% or more that wasn't automated. So the point of Sprinter was to bridge that gap. It is manual testing. It doesn't pretend to be automated testing, but it gives you all the tools to go along with that. So they are two different things. It doesn't do away with QTP, but it nonetheless does give you some of the technologies of BPT in order to to order manually manage that test.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. I'll take a few more questions. I've got one question here. Does BPT work with IBM Series applications?
Yeah, it works with all sorts of different applications. There are some applications where different partners of ours have got pre-built components even, so that so you can create these different components. You don't have to create the components because they're already created for you. So there are some different IBM components around. There are also Oracle or SAP components created. But if you want to go and create your own, yes, it certainly does work with those IBM tools.
Perfect. Thank you. A few more, I think, Rob, and then we'll take this offline, guys, if that's okay with you guys. I've got one more. Do all test cases have to use the same version of the component, or can I have some test cases using version 1 component? Sorry, Rob, just 1 second. While others use version 2. So does that make sense?
Yeah. If you've got one component, then they will all use whatever the current component is. But I mean, if you want to have different flavors of that component, then obviously you can use things like test configurations. But you could also duplicate that component and change something about it depending on what it is that you wanted. So, but yeah, they do need to have the same version, but you can introduce change quite quickly just by duplicating something.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I think we'll definitely take some of the questions offline, as I think it's lunchtime and I know everyone's sort of hungry at the moment. Yes, we will send you all a copy of the recording, hopefully end of play today or tomorrow morning. So yes, you will all be receiving copies of the recording, no problem at all. So again, thank you very much for taking the time for joining us for this presentation. Again, if you do have any other questions, so you want to know more about business process testing, our service offering on that with HP, please do give us a call. Our contact details are on the screen as we speak. Rob or Peter, do you want to add anything to that before we close off the webinar?
I don't think I've personally got anything to add.
Peter, do you want to?
Pretty comprehensive job there. Well done, Rob.
Thank you.
I think, so that concludes our presentation today. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us once again, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.